So the revelations at Google continue to flow post the firing of James Damore. Not only is the company in denial of the voluminous science on sex differences, it turns out they've embraced the spurious notion of microaggressions. In an interview for Reason.com with Kathy Young, James Damore noted that indeed microaggressions are being taught and that a weekly email goes out to about 20,000 Googlers where people submit examples. One was complaining someone suggesting to use a picture of an attractive person on an ad to increase the number of clicks, which is apparently a case of lookism.
Oh, Jesus.
Sad stuff. So Google has well and truly drunk the social justice Kool-Aid. But I want to take on this idea of having a more gender diverse workplace. Today it seems to be taken as a given that we need more women in tech. Even James Damore outlines in his Google memo non-discriminatory ways to reduce the gender gap. For example, making it less competitive and making software engineering more people-orientated. Although he does go on to say there are limitations to that approach and that arbitrary social engineering of tech just to make it appealing to equal numbers of men and women should be avoided. But the idea that we need more women in tech is just truth by assertion. Why do we need more women in tech? Well, because diversity. But that's a non-answer. We've been conditioned to believe that whenever you see an underrepresentation of women in a particular field, this must be due to sexism or socialization into gender roles, and therefore something needs to be done about it. Although for some reason the gender gap in bricklaying doesn't need fixing. See, the gender ideologues believe that equality of opportunity should result in equality of outcome. And when it doesn't, it must be because of discrimination of some kind. But to subscribe to this way of thinking, you have to believe that there are no differences between men and women. And so the irony of the gender ideologues' approach is that in order to get their forced gender equality of outcome, they have to deny the natural diversity that exists between the sexes. But it seems this is getting harder and harder to deny. Take, for example, the report out from the Australian Institute of Family Studies this month about the career aspirations of young adolescent boys and girls. This chart shows the top 10 ranked occupation categories of 14 to 15-year-old boys and girls. Notice the occupations that appear in bold only appear on that gender's list. And so for boys and girls, 7 out of the top 10 occupations don't register in the opposite gender's list. And if you look at the top 5 categories, they're all different from the opposite gender. And yes, I am assuming there are only 2 genders. And what do we notice in the top 5 for boys? Engineering, IT, construction and automotive, technical trades and sports. And the girls? Doctors, dentists or other medical professions, educational professionals, legal or social professional, social includes psychology, personal service, which includes beauticians, hairdressers, and performance arts. Professional design, planning or architect feature at 8th on both the boys and girls list in roughly the same percentages. But that's really the only occupation that boys and girls aspire to in equal numbers. Performance arts comes in second, although even there, when we look at the percentage breakdown, there are significantly more girls interested. And when it comes to doctors, dentists and other health professionals, girls are almost twice as likely to want to pursue those careers. The most striking part of this data is just how different girls and boys are across almost all categories. Take IT, for example. Almost 6% of boys and just 0.3% of girls chose that as a career aspiration. Boys chose engineering and transport by almost 8-1 over girls. By contrast, girls are more interested in law and psychology by about 2.5 times to 1, education by almost 4-1, and health and welfare support and care by almost 12-1 over boys. And the report goes on to note, many of these gender differences reflect the gendered nature of occupations in the current labour market, and they go on to list some examples. But of course we know what the gender ideologues will say. This is all evidence that boys and girls are socialised into those roles at an early age. So we need to start even earlier. So for example, in kindergarten, let's stop calling boys and girls boys and girls. Yeah, that'll fix it. But getting back to Google and their diversity agenda, when Larry Page and Sergey Brin started their research project back at Stanford in 1995, was diversity one of their key concerns? Was diversity at the top of their priority list when they incorporated Google in 1998? Was diversity one of the selling points that secured them their $25 million in equity funding in 1999? Google has always had female employees. Of the first 21 employees, 6 were women. But was that because of an explicit diversity strategy, or did they just hire the best people for the job? Was diversity part of the pitch when they took the company public in 2004? How about Apple's Jobs and Wozniak? Was diversity at the forefront of their business plan? Can you name one tech giant of today that owes its success to gender diversity? The point is, it's only when a company has reached maturation and become successful that the diversity ideologues descend and insist that gender diversity is necessary for a company to be successful. Anyone that runs a small business knows that diversity is the least of your concerns. Small business owners can't afford to worry about trivialities such as their workforce gender split. They need people who can perform the functions they need them to perform. Mark Latham wrote about this in his latest column in The Telegraph this week. He recounts a recent conversation with the owners of a mid-sized financial company about what they thought of some of Australia's largest corporations' sudden embrace of the diversity agenda. Diversity started out as an attempt by some big companies to soften their image, one said. None of the CEOs liked being attacked as greedy capitalists, so they used diversity as a shield as corporate virtue signalling. Another argued, these businesses are usually in oligopoly markets where making money is easy, so financially they can afford to carry the indulgence of diversity and overstaffed diversity units. The big banks, for example, don't really compete against each other, they're government guaranteed. Wait for the next recession. The diversity units will be the first ones sacked. Well, let's hope so. Then they talked about how much small to medium-sized businesses despise the diversity agenda. Every business we deal with thinks it's rubbish, and the small guys can't afford it anyway. Job applicants are always different, so if you're serious about making a dollar, you have no choice but to hire the best people available. The big corporates are at war with this reality. And that's well said. Now, in the wake of James Damore's firing, I've seen a couple of articles like this one. This is an example of the woke woman who also disagrees with the diversity agenda as it's currently practiced in the tech industry, but for some reason still can't get herself off the diversity bandwagon. In the copious hiring I did at Google, 97% of the people I hired were men. I wrote reams of appeals to the hiring committee to make cases for cross-functional candidates who would be great assets to Google, even though a typically male-dominated software engineering interview crew did not find these candidates up to snuff. I had a 90+% success rate changing the hiring decision for these candidates. Almost every one of these hires made an amazing difference to the company. 98+% of these candidates were men. It's not like I wasn't trying to hire women, but I was working with a candidate pool composed of 90% men. Try software engineers with experience in sensors, wireless and hardware stacks before angrily correcting my stats here. There was no way I was going to come out of that with a larger percentage of women hires than I did. I left Google to build Urban AMA. As a woman entrepreneur, I wanted to build a company that had a diverse team. I'm ashamed to admit that I've failed miserably so far. We try hard, but again find ourselves with a 98% male candidate pool. You should know that we're at an early stage startup that cannot afford market salaries. Despite that, we paid premium salaries to bring a few women who did well in our interviews, but they lacked the energy to put us into overdrive. Worse, they were starting to drain the energy from the rest of the team. Eventually, we had to do the right thing for the company and let them go. I'm now back to being the only woman on the tech team. So even after this experience, she goes on to say that she started her 7-year-old son and 9-year-old daughter on coding. The son loves it, but the daughter hates it. But she's told her daughter learning coding is not optional, and she can only quit once she's gotten good at it. Can't wait to see how that relationship turns out. After diversity attempts at large companies and my own startup and the attempts to start tech early with my own children, I can tell you that our obsession with diversity and attempts to solve it are only fucking it up for the actual women in tech out there. What do I mean by this? We get upset about the state of gender diversity in tech, we make a pact to hire more women, The pool has a lot more men than women. After some rounds of low to no success, we start to compromise and hire women just because we have to. These women show up at work and perform not as great as we want them to. It reinforces to the male population that was already peeved by the diversity push that women aren't that good at tech after all. They generalise that observation on the entire women in tech community. Sooner or later, some such opinions get out there. The feminists amongst us go crazy. The diversity advocates are caught in a frenzy and make a pact to hire more women. This loops infinitely. So she obviously gets the problem of hiring people just because they have vaginas. But what's her solution? To solve diversity, we must start at the source of the problem, encouraging women to pursue engineering in college. So she's completely missed the point. There is no problem to be solved. It is a non-problem. You don't need more women in tech, just like you don't need more women in bricklaying or more men in psychology. Stop with the social engineering. Let people decide for themselves what they want to do with their lives. By all means, expose them to a wide range of vocations, but let them decide for themselves and celebrate the natural diversity between men and women instead of the forced diversity of the gender ideologues. And what better way to end this video than with a range of new t-shirts that celebrate Google's approach to diversity, and more specifically with respect to Google's approach to diversity of opinion on YouTube. These are perfect for strolling around the neighborhood in, say, Mountain View, California, or just to wear to work, especially if you're a Google employee. And from August 25th to 29th, if you use this offer code, you will receive 15% off all t-shirts in the IM shop. What a way to start the weekend. So next time a major corporate virtue signals for gender diversity, vote with your wallet and send a message that you'd rather use the services of a company that doesn't peddle this nonsense. I'll see you next time.